thank you, Brian. That was really, really eye-opening, and I think leaving on that positive, because we always want something that we can do. Sometimes it's just leaving it in the air, and you're like, I totally get what you're saying about being on the other side, and we're in that state of fear, because I know I am. I'm always fearful that when I see people don't get it, that we're stuck in this wee corner bit. But also think about how children have been hypnotised particularly as well. I think they've been the ones that have been more, and because they've maybe had parents who are really scared, and they've got grandparents and things, and also at school. And my question would be that how do we help the children in a way, if there is a way? I mean, fear is massive, and they've been subjected to so much, and they've been taken away from, when you look at life and their friendships and fun and joy, all that's part of what we're here to do as well.
Well, it's hard to say what you can do with the masses, but what I would suggest, if it's somebody in your family, the first thing you do is you start to change your internal image of that child. You start to see them being successful. You start to tell them that they're going to be successful, instead of holding this fear in your head all the day, because you basically transmit. I've worked with a lot of salespeople, right? And I used to teach them sales hypnosis, right? And basically, we are senders and receivers, right? And so we're constantly sending out the emotions, and people are receiving them, right? So if you've ever been with a salesperson, right, and logically he ticks all the boxes and he's wanting to sell you something and you want it, but it doesn't feel right and you just don't do it, that's because he's probably over anxious. Maybe he can't pay his mortgage or something like that, and he's over anxious and he's transmitting that onto you. So if you are overly worried about the kids that are in your life, you're transmitting that. And if you're transmitting that, you're instilling that image in them, and you're taking them in that direction. So the first thing again is to work on your own internal representations of what's real, what's possible, and what you can do for that child. And what will happen is you'll not realise it, but your unconscious behaviour will be changed in subtle ways, and you'll start to look for ways, and you'll find creative ways to actually guide that child out of it. But you can't guide somebody out of something that you're in yourself. You have to go first, if that makes sense.
Be the change you want to see.
Be the change, that's how it is.
Thanks, Brian. That was brilliant. But more than that, it was really important. So I wrote out 5 questions, but I'm only going to ask one. I want to be brief. So how do you tell the difference between hypnosis and reality? And how long does the hypnotic influence last? If it's spell cast over many years or even generations?
Got a different point of view on hypnosis, right? Hypnosis is just another word for communication, and it's communication at an unconscious level, right? And like I said to you before, everybody's in a trance all the time. It's like a fish can't live out of water, we can't live in a trance, and it's just the program that we run to deal with the outside world. It's just the subjective configuration that we are in. And the whole idea of what I'm trying to show people in the programs that I'm running and the sessions that I help people with is to teach people to configure their own subjective reality. So they re-hypnotise themselves, if you like. It's not maybe the best word to use, but what I'm saying to you is it never ends from the day that you're born to the day that you end. A trance is just the subjective configuration that you're in. But to try and answer your question is, the first step is to become aware of that. The second step is to learn how to manipulate your own perception to suit you. Choices. Well, one of the things I said, turn your back on all this media and all the stuff that's going on. A lot of it is going to cancel itself out. Don't fight and struggle so much. I'm not saying give up all your fights and struggle, but there might be a time, sometime in the future, when we need to get together and we need to get on the streets. But if you're living in that dystopian future now, day to day, for weeks and months ahead, you're burning yourself out. You're going nowhere. There's a good metaphor that's used a lot in Eastern philosophy, and they talk about life like being like a river. So if you can imagine life is like a river, right? And it's a windy river, and it's got all these big boulders in there. There's 3 types of people swimming in there, right? The first person is the person who just goes with the current. It's like a paper boat. and he just gets smashed against the rocks and ends up all broken on the side. Then there's the fighters, the freedom fighters. They're in there, they're trying to change the shape of the river, which is impossible. You can't change the shape of the river. And then they bash up against the rock, then they start fighting with the rock. And then what happens is they get bashed off that rock and they go further down and they fight with another rock. And here's the thing about when you become a fighter or anything, what happens is you're training your unconscious mind to become a fighter. And that becomes your identity. And when that becomes your identity, even when there's no rocks there and there's no obstacles, you'll create them. You'll actually create things to fight because you're that used to doing it. All you'll see is rocks everywhere because that's what you've trained your mind to do. And you're trained to fight them. Then there's the third type, is the surfer. The surfer jumps in the water and he goes with the flow. And he has an image where he wants to go. This is what I'm trying to say. You get the image of what you want to create. And he just goes with the flow. And all he does is he just makes small movements to avoid the obstacles, to avoid the rocks. And he gets down at the bottom, refreshed, relaxed, or whatever. Now, the fighter might get down at get to the bottom, but he's going to be smashed, he's going to be burnt out, and he's going to be in a bad way. So if you want to come out of this whole thing in the best possible way, choose to become a surfer. Because if you're fighting all the time, you're basically killing yourself, and you're going. And there might be a time further down when it does get bad, and we all need to get together. We all need to be strong. We all need to look after ourselves with nutrition. We all need to look after ourselves physically, but more importantly, we all need to look after ourselves mentally. Because if we arrive at that part of the river further down the line and we're totally burnt out, we're not going to be good to anybody. And here's another thing, right? Just say I'm wrong, right? And we do go to the full dystopian thing. If you've trained your mind all that time to avoid all this stuff and come out stronger, I'll still be in a better position than what you are, having lived in that dystopian future all the way down. So that's what my answer would be, is to take that metaphor and become a surfer rather than a fighter.
Thanks, Brian. That was brilliant talk. Just to follow on from that point that you made there, I'm definitely the middle one, the fighter, the one that bashes themselves against the rocks and burns themselves out. But how do you personally, because one thing that I find very difficult is speaking to people that are so blinded by it all, and I get so frustrated, and when I try and talk to people and they don't understand, and as you say, you present them with logic and they don't want to hear the logic, and I just wonder how you personally...
Right, this is how I would deal with it, right? The fact that you're getting emotional about it, whether it's anger, frustration, sad, what the fuck, it doesn't matter what it is, right? You're part of the pendulum, right? You've got the two extreme ends of the pendulum. They're on the masker side and you're on the dystopian side. And you're being used by the energetic forces, you're being drawn together, smashed together in order to create balance, right? So the first thing you've got to understand is that you think that you're autonomous, but you're actually being used by the pendulum. You probably think that they're your thoughts, but they're not, and you've not actually got access to your rational mind. So what you want to do is you want to step back, and instead of being a participant, you become an observer, right? And when you become an observer, then you're no longer controlled by the emotionals because you're dissociated, you're away from the emotional stuff, right? So the first sign I would say to you is the next time that you're in a situation and you feel yourself being frustrated, that's you entering into a trance. That's your autonomy being taken away from you. And that's you moving away from the irrational into the emotional. And that's you starting to move into the structure of a pendulum, which its only function is to feed off the conflict, make it even worse, and smashes together. So I remember in 2015 or 14, I can't remember what it was now, when we did with the independence referendum, and I was like everybody in here, I voted yes, but I was voting for the policies, which never happened. But I remember I used to spend hours and hours online fighting everybody, and I knew all the facts, the figures, and that's what I took pride in. Then somebody had one or two facts more than me, so what the fuck did I do? I spent hours getting books, researching, blah, 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 and I go back. That whole time I was totally burnt out. I never got anything done. So even now when you go online, don't get me wrong, I'm still tempted sometimes, but I step back. When you watch these kind of arguments going online, right, get curious about it, step back and realise you're just watching the nature of duality unfold. And I think all of this stuff really that we're seeing, right, I don't even believe that the elites actually have as much control as we think that they do. I think that's another construct that we're creating in our mind, right? I think what we're just witnessing is the natural energetic forces of the universe playing themselves out and expressing themselves through the nature of duality over and over again. So for example, I got interested recently in fractals, and fractals really fascinate me because if you look at a leaf and you look at a tree and you look at its roots, it's all made up of these little fractals that kind of branch out. And if you pick up a leaf and you look at the leaf is just like the tree. The middle vein has got a vein through it, and it has all the little branches, and it goes on and on and on. If you look at a snowdrop, right? A snowdrop, if you look under a microscope, again, it's all these little branches. And scientists say, right, if it wasn't for the fact that the humidity and the temperature that would melt the snowflake, a snowflake would grow as big as the Earth, because it would just keep going like that. And that's what's happening. And what I noticed as well, these were the patterns I noticed when I gave up the stage hypnotism, and I noticed these patterns in people's behaviour. And it's quite funny because I think I mentioned it to two people here who were in the pub. I was sitting at my computer the last time trying to prepare for this talk, which never happened. And the door went, and it was a Jehovah's Witness. And a couple of them, so I'm polite to these people, I don't throw them out or nothing like that. I don't invite them for a cup of tea, I'm not that friendly. But anyway, so they asked me if they wanted to save me. They wanted to save me from suffering and stuff. So I took their little leaflet and I took it and I looked at it. And I thought about my freedom fighters in the pub. And they're doing the same. It's a pendulum. And what pendulums do, what they do is they try and recruit people to their side. And it's the same thing. Everybody wants to save everybody from suffering. And it just kind of grows and grows and grows. And so these are all, what I actually believe, it's the universe, it's the natural energetic forces working and expressing themselves through these patterns over and over again. If you look at wars, look what's happening in Ukraine, for example. There's no rational thought. It's absolutely crazy. If you look at the politics, what's happened with Sturgeon and all the wokeness and all this transgender stuff, it's like there's no rational thought. Everybody's been pulled into this pendulum, and there's no got access to their rational thought.
Ukraine's another mass propaganda one with the yellow and blue colours, and because everywhere you look there's yellow and blue, yellow and blue. COVID colours, yellow and blue, yellow and blue.
In the stand down in Musselburgh, right, in the actual stand we were in, I think it was painted blue, there was a yellow badge and something else. And if you start looking around, you'll see that combination everywhere, and it's simply because it's just prime colours. It's prime colours. I don't believe that is everywhere. That's my take on it anyway, right? I could be wrong. But this is what I'm trying to say is, and I might be wrong, because there is no ultimate truth, but what my take is, what happens is, right, if you see what I was able to do with people on the stage, when you work somebody up, another good phrase for hypnosis is heightened imagination, right? And so if everybody's got a heightened imagination, we start to imagine things. You start to see things and put meanings to things that aren't there. And you just fall deeper and deeper into this rabbit hole. What I would say to you is, turn your back on it and start to work on creating the future that you want for you and the people around you. And so the other thing about pendulums, right? Pendulums. You cannot not, just like a trance, you cannot not be affected or influenced by a pendulum. So what you want to do is you want to disconnect from many of these things that are taking your time and energy as you can, and choose the pendulums that you want to put your energy and time into.
Hi, Brian. Certainly want to add my own words of thanks to you for your fascinating talk. And my wife Denise and I, we study a thing called the Course in Miracles. People can look it up if they're interested, but many of the things that we read about and study resonate, almost perfectly with what you're talking about. So I very much get the idea that we can somehow create our own reality. And one of the lessons of the course is that there is no order of difficulty in miracles and performing miracles. So there aren't hard miracles, there aren't easy miracles, they're just miracles, and they are a product of what we create the world to be. That said, I think you take your point about freedom fighters, and I think it's very easy, and I guess I certainly feel I'm left one bubble, which is maybe a bubble of the Greens, radical left, etc. And now I'm in this bubble. And in this bubble, I do spend a lot of time following certain Telegram channels, and there's a lot of dark stuff, about, okay, the pandemic's gone, but they're just giving us some false hope, and then they're going to hit us in a few months' time with some variant of avian flu or whatever. That's going to be bubbling under for a bit. Or we can talk about 5G, or we can talk about the online safety bill, etc., etc. There's so much we could be fighting against, and I, for one, certainly get burnt out very quickly. So I try and pick the things I get involved in. But practically, I do feel that, and I'm sure you feel too, that we don't want this dystopian future to happen, and that does require some action to be taken. I mean, you mentioned getting out in the streets. So how do we do that? How do we be active and defend freedom, put it that way, in a way that we're surfing with down the stream and not bashing into rocks? How practically can we surf the river?
Right, well, as you were saying that, something came to mind. I seen a video, believe it or not, it was David Icke, but there was something he said that really runs with what I was saying tonight. He says, you become what you fight. Right, and you have to realise you do, you become what you fight. And so if you want to take action right now, you take action in, see, politicians always get us involved in big national, big events, right? And the reason why they do it is because if they can shift your mind away from your own personal situation to big events, then you don't have any power, because you can't actually do anything about these things, right? So my personal rule is that if you can't personally change anything, ignore it. You can't change what's happening in Russia with Putin. You can't change what's happening with Biden, and ignore it. It doesn't have. I just didn't give it any time of day. But look at the things that you can change. The things that are actually. In fact, I think I was talking to Richard in the bar about that. Richard's wanting to set up this common knowledge centre where we can all go and whatever. That's an example of something that you could maybe create in your immediate environment. Now, if everybody did that, then you would get the change. I don't know what's going to happen down the line. Maybe you will be able to go into the streets, but from what I've looked at, all these big marches and all these demonstrations, they don't seem to achieve anything. Yeah. The only way you can achieve anything is to just stop complying, stop fighting, stop complaining, just do your own thing. If everybody did that, switched off the media, that would be it finished. So what I would suggest is that you just really look at the people that are close to you and work out what you're going to do for them. There's another thing as well, though. This has always been that way, long before the COVID stuff, but every client that I get that comes with a problem, and most people that don't have problems, if you ask them, well, what do you want? Well, I don't want the pandemic. I don't want this dystopian future. I hate this anxiety. Yeah, but what do you want? Well, I don't want my kids to be vaccinated. Yeah, but what do you want? Nobody can tell you what they want. They're always running through their mind what they don't want. And if that's what you're running through your mind as your predominant thoughts, the computer in your brain doesn't sort of judge whether it's a positive or negative one. It just says, hey, this is what they want. And they start to organise your unconscious behaviour, and they start to drag you in that direction. So again, I go back to what I said before. If you really want to make a difference, I believe, is you do it through non-compliance. And the first one is become fearless and create your own internal representations and start to plan things the way you want them to be, and start to look at your family differently. If you've got young people growing up, don't see them as helpless kids that are going to the fodder. See them as strong, powerful, intelligent kids, and feed that information into them and tell them that way. You'll do a lot more than you would ever imagine doing that than you could ever do by going and fighting in the streets, because the generation that's coming up. And the other thing is, you have to look after your own. It sounds a bit selfish, right? You have to look after your own, because the truth is, you can only really affect your own. If you get pulled into this big mass thing and you're gone out, and I hate to say it, if you're gone out and you're giving leaflets in the streets, your energy's just leaking away. And it's not really having an effect. That's my view on it. You don't have to agree with it, but that's what I would say.
I just come in with an idea about surfing the river, which which people might find useful. Just because I spend all my time trying to wake people up. You know, that's why I do full time with the 5G and and all sorts of things. And at the start, I found that yes, you do get this confrontation where you feel like you're bashing yourself against the rocks, so it's just a little technique that I started to develop, so I just wanted to share it with everyone, just because it's worked really well, and I've used it more and more, and it's basically removes the confrontation from the situation, so that you actually then remove the opportunity of you bashing yourself against the rock, and so the analogy that I use when I'm speaking to someone who wants to start to be a little bit confrontational is I just say, look, imagine, because a lot of the time they feel that they're not qualified to judge, and they feel that you're not qualified to judge. And so what I explain is I try and explain to people and just say, look, imagine that you're called up for jury service, because we're all qualified to be called up for jury service, every single one of us, yeah? If we're on the electoral roll, that is. And I then say, imagine if we still had the death penalty in this country. Then what that would mean is that would then make you qualified to sit on a jury and decide, and be part of the decision of whether to send somebody to their death or not. Yeah? And if you're in that position, you would have to look at all the evidence put forward, of course, by the prosecution, but also you'd feel duty bound to look at all the evidence that was going to be put forward by the defence. And so if you put themselves in that position, they suddenly think that because the confrontation is between the defence and the prosecution. That's where the confrontation is. But the jury is sort of sat, sort of in the middle, taking all the information. And I've said that to a lot of people, and they said, you know what? Okay, I'll take what you've given, and I'll read it, and I'll look at it, and they walk away in a completely different frame of mind than the confrontational frame of mind they were at the beginning. And that's kind of like an example of surfing the river.
Yeah, Brian. Yeah, fantastic talk. Really, really enjoyed that. Thanks for taking the time to do that and share your expertise with us. Was the guy in the video talking Chinese? He wasn't. He was talking his notion of Chinese.
I can't speak Chinese.
Nor can I. Yeah. I've no idea either. What I thought was really, really great about your talk, and actually just kind of thinking out loud, maybe this is something, like, I've got the camera, maybe we could film something if people are interested in adding their story to some kind of video thing. But what you said about how hypnotism, your experience in life, when it all kind of kicked in with the propaganda, it allowed you to see it real quick. Similarly, I mean, I spent a year wearing a mask, honestly, I was totally suckered in by the whole thing. And I entered into a year of essentially voluntary solitary confinement. So stupid, but that is what it is. But eventually, when I did see through it, a large chunk of what allowed me to do that was I did a marketing degree when I was younger. So when all this started coming through, I was like, oh, this brainwashing after a bit of time. Totally, it was the science of implanting desire and simultaneously making you feel bad about something, and then having the desire as the means to get out of it. So yeah, it's just what you're talking about. But yeah, so for me, marketing was the means to sort of unravel a lot of the propaganda.
The first thing that happened was when they were wanting people to take the vaccine was they said the pharma companies weren't liable. Mm-hmm. And it was like, well, wait a minute. It's like a total red flag right there from the off.
Global legal identity was, yeah.
And I was speaking to doctor friends about it, and they were like, No, it's okay. Don't worry. They've been looking into these things for years, and I was like, well, I'm sorry, but it's totally untested. Yeah. It's like, I mean, you don't need to be a rocket scientist to think, well, I'm sorry, but that's just completely. It just took that from there on in. I was like, no, and that was late 2020, and then I still probably. Maybe I had it in the back of my mind at that point, you wait and see how things go. But nobody else was prepared to wait. They were just like, no, give me it now, Yeah. it was just a sort of strange sort of event, because you know, the more time went past, the more I learned, and the more I looked into things, and you know, the more everyone else just put their fingers in their ears and closed their eyes.
I did once. I remember I had one guy, right, and I remember it put chills through the whole place. I used to do this scene, right, where I'd have a rubber doll, and a rubber doll at the sex shop, only for the stage. I used to get the cheap ones at the joke shop, and I seen this advert in the paper where you could get the real ones for 29 quid at the top of Leith Walk, and I went down to buy one with the goggly eyes and open mouth. And I went in and I says, "Can I have a rubber doll?" He says, "Oh really?" I said, "No, it's not what you think, it's for a show." I went, "Aye, right." So he kept bringing them out these really expensive ones. No, what the £29, no, this one's £60, look, it's good. And he had these beautiful women printed on the box trying to obviously get me aroused. He goes, "No, I just want a cheap one." He wouldn't believe me. Anyway, so I used to do this thing where I would get people copulating my dolls and then make them up halfway through. I mean, it was a classy show, right? But I remember I had this one guy up, right, and he copulated with the doll, and he thought he was married to the doll. And then I told him, I woke him up, right, and I gave him this really bad stutter. And I told him, "You're really pissed off with your girl here, because she's telling everybody in the audience your deepest secrets, and you're going to be pissed off. And the more you're pissed off with her, the more she's going to shout and blab everything." So he was fuck it. He was like this. Next minute, he grabbed her by the throat and he started shaking her really bad. And he put her on the ground and he started punching into this doll. And I says, "If he's got a girlfriend in the audience, would you want to leave now?" So there's been a few things like that. And there was one time, funny enough, when I was through in Cowdenbeath, and again it was a similar thing. It was a hard night. It was a club show in Cowdenbeath. And I always preferred to have a few guys. You can do things with women, but you could really be a bit harder on the guys. So I got one guy up. I managed to get one guy up. And he says to me, "You're not going to make me look stupid, are you?" I says, "No, just come up. And I remember we did the rubber doll thing, and when I says, "1, 2, 3, you're wide awake." And he woke up and he seen himself on top of this rubber doll, and he went ballistic. And he ran from me and he got me by my throat against the wall like that. He was only a wee guy, but he still had me by the throat, and I'm going, "Sleep, sleep, sleep, sleep," and he wouldn't. He was so wound up, right, that he wouldn't actually go back into trance. And he went, "Fuck you." He goes, "Fuck you, that's it, I'm away. Then he got off and he went back down and sat with his mates, right. And I let him calm down for a while because I needed to get him back up, because I only had women and you could only do so many things with the girls, right? So I says, "Come back up now, I just want to make sure you're all right." And the girls at the front row said, "No, didn't get him back up. So he was a bit relaxed. I says, "Look, mate," I says, "Look, I just want to make sure you're okay." No hard feelings. So I took his hand and I went, "Sleep," and he went out like a light, right? So I had him doing all the striptease and all that, bending over and all that kind of stuff. Stripped him off to his pants, right? He had his pants on, and but then I realised, this is where I learned to put in the safety suggestion, which is, no matter what happens tonight, you'll always be the hypnotist's best friend. And I hammered it in 2 or 3 times, right? And so he went to the area to sit with his mates, right? And then what happened was, what was it? He says, that was it. He says, aye. And what I said to him, I gave him a suggestion. I says, what was it? When I count to 3, you'll be wide awake, you'll think you're fully dressed, and you won't wake up until the hypnotist has left. The minute the hypnotist leaves the building, your mates will point out, you'll be wide awake, you'll be blah, 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 you'll put your clothes on. So that was my escape route, right? So what happened was, he came up to me and he says, "Hi, come here, what's that? Come here." I says, "What?" He says, "Come here," and he's up there, he's got his arms around me, he's my best mate and all this stuff. I go, "Fuck, I didn't mean this to happen, I was trying to get rid of him." And he says, I'm going to buy you a pint." I said, "Well, it's okay, I'm fine. Well, I'll take you to the bar." And he's trying to buy me a pint and he's looking for his wallet, because of course he was like naked, anything on. So that, and then there was another time through in Rosyth, there was this big Geordie guy, he was a Marine, I think, or something. He was in the Navy or something. He was huge. And again, he was the only guy I got up that night. It was a small wee pub, right? And when you've only got one person, you have to milk them to get the laughs to make sure you're going to get paid, right? So you have to be brutal with them. I mean, I don't know if I'd go back to that profession. I was a bit cruel at times. Anyway, so I got this big Geordie guy up, right? He was huge. And so I had him doing everything. I had him copulating on the doll, wearing a wig with lipstick on, dressed as Madonna. I mean, I had to take it through the whole thing, right? And when I started off, you start off with light things, right? And I told him he was a gay raver, and he was up doing the rave music was on, and he was raving like this, kind of this big guy, like really, he couldn't stop, right? And then at the end of the night, I sat him, he sat over there, right? And at the time, I had this big mixing desk, and my pal who ran a band, he gave me a lend it because I didn't have my own sound system at this point, right? And his mates all told him what had happened, and I just, fucking looked at him, and he was looking over like that. And he come over, he says, see you, and he came over to hit me, right? But my brother-in-law who did my music, quick thinking, he put the rave music on, so he went to hit me, he went back into this little rave dance. And then every time he tried to like pull the plug out to unpack it to go, he came over to hit me, so I had to keep putting it in, so this went on for about half an hour. So I mean, I've had quite a few things like that as well. Aye, a few things like that.
Yeah, it was to go back to this, like rocks and surfing and bashing against the rocks idea, and to get to your point about at the beginning of 2020 when the lockdown happened, I didn't believe a fucking word of it from the minute it happened. But the one thing that was definitely missing from everything was an explanation for any alternative side. About the only person that was saying anything at that time, I suppose, online that I could find was David Icke. So I watched and listened to David Icke for about 3 days about what he was saying. Didn't necessarily agree with it all, but it gave me some sense or idea of something else that might be happening, apart from the bullshit that was on the television. And I guess for me, the question is, like, now there's so much information out there, and I think we do all get slightly bombarded by a lot of it, for sure, but at least the information's there, and the information is there because people are really fighting to put that information out there. And so we need people that are fighting in order to have that information and that access. And also that, from the point of view of that, from that dearth of information and the surfing down the river idea, I feel like I'm maybe a bit more of a surfer. I'm not necessarily one of these people that's out fighting all the time. And I often feel very guilty about that because I'm coming against people that I see that need that, extra bit of information or could be helped out of a really difficult circumstance, or it's pricking at my emotions because it's something, but then I'm not necessarily in the blessed place to then deal with it because, like you, I'm maybe getting emotionally charged when somebody says, oh, but, what about this climate change? And you're like, whoa, wait a minute, and so to put your view across, but in a way that's calm. So my question, I suppose, is, if you're wanting to surf the river, how do you make sure that, you look after the people that you see that are bashing themselves against the rocks and getting really upset and hurt by the things that are going on? And how much is it, because we do need these people that are giving us this information that it is really important. And, without it, I wouldn't have been able to navigate where I am because I certainly wasn't getting that information from mainstream or friends or family.
I've got a point of view on that, right? I mean, if I see somebody in they're at the early stages, I'll spend some time and I will go into these conversations, but I keep them to the minimum, right? But there's another thing you have to realise, right? All media is media, right? And people who run the media, all these people who we're kind of maybe putting on a bit of a pedestal, right? No, when I say we, I'm talking about this side, not you personally, right? What I'm trying to say to you is, a lot of these people are deliberately giving you information that gets you angry because it serves them, it gives them relevance, it gives them large followings, right? So they're creating their own pendulums. Some of them are even making money on the back of it, and they're getting this high profile thing. And I noticed with some of these people online, when all the lockdowns disappeared and things were going back to normal, they were still trying to stir it up because they didn't want to let go of this kind of place of power and importance that they had actually got in relevance. So you have to be careful with that as well. If you are watching this stuff and it's getting you angry or it's getting you depressed or if it's getting you despondent, you've got to realise that they might not even be consciously aware that they're doing it, but they have got, again, somewhere on the line to keep putting that stuff out. And so step away from it. But to answer the other part of your question, if I meet somebody and we're getting to that conversation and they want to know, I will do it occasionally now and again, but I just don't live it 24/7. I can understand that, and it must be hard, but you've got to accept that's just it. You're trying to change the river. You can't change the river. You've just got to go with it, and you've just got to support them in any way you can. The other thing, of course, is the vaccinations are definitely deadly. We all know that, but they're not as deadly as what we thought at the first. We thought we were going to have people piled around us everywhere, and it's not happened that way. So we don't know. And I mean, another thing, when I was in the lockdowns, I reached a real low where I almost never came out the lockdowns. Because I'd been my mum's carer for 5 years and I was totally stressed out, and all this happened and I couldn't see a way out of it. And so basically I had to go inside, and I reached a point where I actually lost the fear of dying. And I realised that everybody in this room is going to die sometime. You can't save anybody because we're all going to die. And when you accept death as part of your natural journey to wherever we're going next, then it kind of makes it easier. Because you can't save everybody, because everybody's 20, 30, 40, 100 years, none of us will be here.
The question I was going to ask is a question I hear most weeks, where people in the group, Stand in the Park or otherwise, will say, why did we not get taken in by the hypnosis or the lies? What is right with us? What's wrong with us? And we've pondered these questions for a long time. So the question to you is, why on earth were some of us never taken in by the lies or, as you describe, hypnosis?
I think to a certain extent we were, because divide and conquer is a tool that they use. And basically what they did, they created a deep divide and conquer, and they put us all in a state of fear, which renders us impotent to be able to manifest what we want. So I think in the reality was we were all kind of used by, but to also answer the other side, why did we not go into that side of the trance? I don't know. All I know is when I do a show, I'm going to get a percentage of people who are just going to be so easy to, it's ridiculous taking money for doing what I'm doing. You have no idea how easy it can be sometimes when you've got the right people in the audience, and there's other people there that would never get up on stage. I don't know, it's just the way it is. But the real answer is we were all taken in because we were all on the two extreme sides. The thing is, if you're on the extreme side of any spectrum, and I'm not talking about transgender here, but if you're on any extreme side, you'll never have peace or happiness. It just doesn't happen on the extreme sides. And so, if you're on the extreme sides, you're being used by the pendulum that will detect conflict, increase that conflict, clashes against each other, because that's how it exists. It feeds off that fear and that conflict. So it's kind of like a bit like being kind of falsely smug, because in reality, by being on the other side of that spectrum, then you're playing right into the divide and conquer tactics that they're using, which has been done throughout the whole society now with people politics, identity politics, etc. So again, I keep saying it, I've said it a couple of times, I don't know if it's getting in, but the whole idea is to step back and observe rather than participate on either side. So if you feel yourself getting frustrated or angry with the other side, then you stop yourself, you think, well, I'm actually going into a trance, I'm being taken over by whatever is happening, and I'm losing my rational mind, so you step back. And there's techniques I've got as well for doing all that, which if there's enough interest, I'd be quite happy to run a workshop sometime.
That'd be good, Brian.
And I'll show you some of the techniques that I've developed over the last 3 years, which have really helped to change people. And well, it does depend. I have to admit, it does depend on the comedy potential. I think you'd be quite funny doing that. I might slip it in. I also remember it was quite funny, right? I take one of my mates everywhere with me, right? And he goes, oh fuck. When I got into Virgin Picture House, which was the last show I did with the Edinburgh Festival in 2010, I walked off the streets, told them what I was doing, and they paid for everything. It was great. I got in. I was up on their website next to Ricky Gervais and all the top comedians, and they put me to sell tickets. They put me amongst all the bands, so it made me look like this big superstar. So I kind of loved it, right? But I'd had all my stuff packed away. I hadn't done any shows for about 6 or 7 years, right? And I didn't check to see if the big rubber Willie was leaking or no, and it was gone down, right? So my mate, of course, I'm the hypnotist. I wouldn't blow that up. Coming near the stagehand, so his job, he used to get embarrassed because I used to introduce him to people with me. Oh, this is my mate, Matt. He blows up my willies for me. That's what I used to say, and And I always remember, right, I had, like, for the rubber-dub-dubs scene at the end, he would throw them on when I needed them, right? And it was so funny because he would blow it up, and then 10 minutes later it started to drip. So I was being and showing, catching him out the corner of my eye, and he's sitting at the edge of the stage going, try to blow this willy up so that I could use it. So I might, if you're comedy potential, I might find a way, some use for you.
This kind of duality, I kind of relate well to this kind of duality, and I think that's what we have to kind of overcome in some way. And so we've got to find the art of being active without being involved negatively. And I think, you know, because not taking part at all and being an observer, it has this good good side, because we don't get inflamed, we don't get passionate, we don't lose energy. But yeah, we have to cultivate this kind of being aware of our thoughts, of our emotion, and just letting them go, not grasping to them. And like that, it gives that space where we can still participate and inform people and be on Instagram and reply to things and, you know, be part of the community that we want to create, basically. So it's like kind of an art that we have to...
Well, that's only part of the strategy, is to step back and be a participant. The second part of the strategy is once you decide what you want to be and what you want to create, and you believe you're going to create it, your unconscious behaviour will be, and energy will be aligned to create that. Yeah. So if you go back into the community coming from that place, rather than the place of the negatives where everybody are, you're going to have a much more positive impact on the community.
Impact wherever we are. I think that's the art that we have to cultivate. And before, while we had been indoctrinated to kind of trust all the authorities, educational, university, doctors, and the rest of it, we have to kind of unlearn all that and learn to try to trust ourselves more with health, with education, with everything. So it's a kind of teaching momentum, I would say.
I saw David Icke in the 90s, That's how long I've been involved in this kind of stuff. And if you look at the guy now, you know, who would want to become? You know, he looks stressed, he looks angry, his hands are deformed. You know, you wouldn't want to become that. No. So I don't know the people in here, how long you've known about this stuff. You know, that's like, you know, I've been in it like nearly 30 years. You're better just drip feeding yourself, If you try to take too much at one time, it just isn't good for you, I've just like took years, and then before you had the internet, I used to get friends, they made a wee podcast thing and a wee MP3 thing, and they'd send me it because I lived abroad many years. So I'd get people to send it, and I'd listen to it, and I'd listen to it again and study what they've got to say, but just take it slowly. And then I brought my kids up and I drip fed them. So whenever this came up, they knew right then. The first day that started, the three of them phoned me up. This is bullshit, Dad. Thanks for telling us about this. We know they're doing this, so we're going to bring out jabs next. No get involved. We'll just go on with our lives. So me and my son, we just started going to the beach. Somebody told me, I don't know how to tell you, somebody mentioned something, there is a lockdown. I just went to the beach, I'm a stonemason, started collecting materials, built sculptures in my garden. And then my other son, he was in Thailand. He got stuck there and he went to university and learned Thai. I had been with him there before. So, and my daughter, she was at university, and I just said, just go on with your life. Just try and ignore it as much as you can. So I think that's the best thing to do. Is the next thing that comes, just be creative, go out and do things. If you try to fight it, you know you're never going to win,
The drip feeding thing's a good thing, because it's a bit like you're seeing the rocks come and then you avoid them. You know enough to avoid them.
Yeah, enough to avoid them.
And then you just avoid them and get on with your life, and you create something good in your life. That's.
I've got 6 siblings, and there's three unjabbed in the family and 4 jabbed. And the 4 jabbed are the 4 with university degrees. So what does that tell you? It didn't really do them much good, did it? So any more bullshit comes along, just get on with your lives and just don't let it consume you.
Thanks, Brian. It was great talk. The thing that really struck me was that we're both sides are in this state of fear. And for me, I mean, you know a bit about my circumstances. For me, when the lockdown wasn't going to lift, I went into that place of fear, terrible fear, because I thought they're going to kill my mom, right? And then they did. They killed my mom. But I couldn't let go of all of that fear and all of that state that I was in until she actually died. And when you were talking there, I was thinking, well, why was that? And there was a perception that I could control it in some way. And that by letting go of all that fear and that terror of my worst nightmare coming true, somehow it would happen because I could see the choice that you're talking about as well. But once she had died, I immediately moved into the place that you're talking about. I mean, it didn't come easy because for 18 months I'd been in this state of fear, like extreme fear, extreme, as if like grabbing onto something, that kind of tension, and it's done a lot of harm. I'm very ill through it, but I'm working really hard on that, and incorporating that part, but that part that you're talking about, just live your life and the positivity and just moving towards that. I call it reality and beauty. That's what I'm following. Those are the things that I want, so that's what I'm following. But my question is, why is it that we have this perception of control that keeps us in that fear?
Anxiety and fear is just a mental construct. It's something that you do inside your head. And I've done lost count of people that have done therapy over the years, but I'd never faced anything like this before, because everything that I'd ever worked on in the past was releasing stuff that was happening in the past. But I found myself in an impossible situation where I was trying to manage an ongoing chaos. And I didn't have an answer for it, and so I had to go inside and try and find a way. I did find some techniques, and although I said to you, I still have mornings where I wake up and don't want to get out of bed. It's the nature of duality. If you're going to have bliss, you're going to have chaos. It's just going to be in your life. So, going back to what we were saying earlier on, what you were experiencing was how your subjective experience was configured. You were creating that experience inside your head, if that makes sense. Although some people get angry when I say that, but they don't understand what I'm saying. But if I was saying to you, it isn't the external stuff that's creating it, it's your reaction to it, it's what you're doing with the data that's coming in. But the other side is, because I've been through the exact same thing as you, but my mother's kind of like dying now. And I don't know what's better, to be honest with you, if she died earlier on, or she's been dragged through all this, because I've seen my mum suffer for the last 3 years, and I can't tell you, if I could sign a piece of paper to give her euthanasia, I would have done it a long time ago. That's where I am with that, and I have been and that's been, even with all the stuff that I know and all the stuff that I work in, I've still got to fight that dark place that it pulls me into when I go and visit her, right? So there's another dimension, another level when you're losing somebody close to you that's not just a construct, it's a spiritual part of you. It's been ripped away, and that's the only way I can explain that part of it. So if you accept the nature of duality, there's got to be pain and pleasure. And in fact, I think it was Eckhart Tolle's book, I read something, he said that in the world of form, everything that you get pleasure and love from will give you pain, eventually. So any sort of relationship has to end sometime, and when it ends, it's really painful. And so that's basically the deal you get when you're going through this experience in the world of form, is that everything that you're getting pleasure from in this moment in time will eventually give you pain and sorrow and sadness when you experience the loss. So I guess the notion behind all these kind of like religious, Buddha, I don't know how many systems the transcendence comes from, is the whole idea is to step back before the world of the form, before thoughts, before emotion, to that place, that part of you that never dies. It's the same from the day that you're born till the day that you die. It was probably here before you were born, and it'll probably be here after you die. And when you do step back and connect with that part on a deep level, then you get the comfort, because you know on a deep level, no matter what happens, you'll always be okay. And that's the part But that's one of the parts that I created when I work with clients now. We configure the subjective internal reality, and we live in three worlds. It's the mental world, the thoughts and images, the emotional world, and also the spiritual connection. And what we do is we try and reconfigure these things so that we automatically create what we want in the physical world. That's the idea behind it. So I don't know if that answers your question, but...
Well, Brian, I think that we'll probably draw the question and answer session to a close. I think you...